The compass sits in his palm while the California Trail disappears under a gray afternoon sky. The danger is not only the fire line moving somewhere beyond the pines. It is the moment his mind slows down, the moment ash fills the air and indecision begins wearing the mask of caution. Most people think panic looks loud. Sometimes it looks like standing still too long. The park ranger knows the map. He knows the ridges, the dry creek bed, the service road that should be east. But smoke has made every direction feel like a rumor, and the compass needle is the only thing in his hand that refuses to argue. What do you do when the next choice matters, but your mind starts breaking into fog? This is where samurai discipline begins, not by escaping chaos, but by standing correctly inside it. The park ranger does not look like a man who is freezing. His boots are planted in dust. His radio is clipped to his shoulder. His pack sits heavy against his spine, and the orange edge of the fire keeps appearing and vanishing between the trunks like something alive enough to lie. From a distance, he would look trained. Prepared. The kind of man people expect to know what to do when a forest starts making its own weather. But inside his chest, the air has turned rough. Every breath tastes like ash. It sits on his tongue, bitter and dry, and the more he tries to think through the route, the more the route breaks apart. The trail he walked that morning is gone now, swallowed by smoke. The sun is still up, but the afternoon has lost its color. The sky is not blue, not gray, not orange. It is a ceiling of dirty light pressing lower by the minute. He grips the compass harder than he needs to. That is the first honest sign. Not the fire. Not the smoke. Not the radio static. His hand. The thumb digs into the metal rim, as if pressure could force certainty out of it. As if the compass could do more than point. As if it could make the decision for him. A park ranger spends years learning the difference between fear and information. Wind direction is information. Heat is information. The movement of smoke is information. A blocked trail is information. Fear is also information, but it is loud, selfish information. It does not care about accuracy. It only wants relief. And in this moment, relief has a dangerous voice. Just wait. Just listen a little longer. Maybe the smoke will thin. Maybe the line will shift. Maybe the right answer will announce itself. That is how indecision wins. It does not always arrive as weakness. Sometimes it dresses itself as wisdom. Sometimes it says, be careful, when what it really means is, do nothing until the choice is no longer yours. He has seen visitors do this on smaller days. A family at a trail junction with a phone that has no signal. A young hiker pretending he is not lost because admitting it would bruise his pride. A father staring at a storm cloud while his kids keep asking if they should turn back. People wait for fear to become clear before they move. It rarely does. Now the ranger feels the same trap closing around his own mind. There is one message on his phone he never answered that morning. His sister had sent it before sunrise. A small thing. A picture of his niece in a school backpack, grinning at the front door. First day of something. Kindergarten, maybe. He had looked at it while drinking gas station coffee near the ranger station, told himself he would reply later, then put the phone away because the day was already pulling at him. Now, absurdly, the image returns. Not as sentiment. As pressure. The little girl in the backpack. The smoke in his throat. The compass needle shaking because his own hand will not stay still. A weaker part of him wants to bargain with the moment. It wants to believe that because he is responsible for others, because he wears the uniform, because he knows this forest, he should not be the one standing here unsure. Shame enters quietly. It does not shout. It stands behind the fear and says, you should already know. That sentence is poison under pressure. You should already know. It turns a hard situation into a personal failure. It makes the mind waste energy defending its image instead of reading the ground. It makes a trained person hide confusion from himself until confusion becomes delay. And delay, in a smoke-filled afternoon, can become its own kind of enemy. The fire line shifts again. A sound rolls through the trees, not an explosion, not a roar like movies make people expect, but a deep cracking rush as dry branches give way somewhere upslope. The ranger turns his head. The smoke opens for 2 seconds, and through the gap he sees a slope he recognizes, blackened brush near the edge, a stand of pines beyond it, the faint cut of a maintenance track lower down. Then the gap closes. Gone. The world becomes 10 yards wide. This is the confrontation, not man against fire, not courage against danger, not some clean heroic picture with music underneath it. It is a trained human being standing inside a situation that is larger than his body, while his own mind begins to lose its sequence. Sequence matters. In ordinary life, people underestimate it. They think discipline means intensity. They think it means being tough, being fearless, pushing harder, talking louder, proving something. But in real pressure, discipline often looks smaller than that. It looks like keeping the next 3 thoughts in the right order. Where am I? What is moving? What is the next confirmed action? The undisciplined mind hates that kind of simplicity. It wants the whole answer. It wants the entire exit plan at once. It wants to solve the next hour before it takes the next step. So it spins. It compares. It replays. It imagines every wrong path until all paths feel wrong. That is what smoke does to the body, and what fear does to the mind. One clouds the trail. The other clouds authority. The ranger lifts the compass closer to his chest. The needle steadies for half a second, then trembles again. He knows better than to blame the tool. The tool is doing what it can. The shaking is his. A gust comes through the trees. Ash moves sideways across the trail, soft and gray, like dirty snow. It lands on his sleeve, on the back of his glove, on the compass glass. He wipes it once with his thumb and leaves a smear. For a moment, he hates that smear. That tiny useless detail becomes the place his frustration wants to live. This is another way the mind avoids command. It finds something small enough to blame. The radio crackles. A voice breaks in and out, clipped by distance and weather. He catches only part of it. Fire activity. Wind change. Units repositioning. Then static chews the rest. His jaw tightens. There is an undisciplined version of this moment. In that version, he keeps spinning the dial, keeps demanding a clear message from a broken signal, keeps staring into smoke as if staring harder can make the forest honest. He waits for perfect certainty. He lets shame make him secretive. He tells himself he is being thorough when really he is losing minutes to the need not to be wrong. That version of him is not evil. It is human. And that is why it is dangerous. Because the worst failures of command often begin as reasonable emotions. A little fear. A little pride. A little embarrassment. A little fatigue. A little hope that someone else will make the moment simpler. None of these feelings are monsters. But under pressure, they start reaching for the wheel. Fudoshin does not ask him to become empty. That is the misunderstanding people love because it sounds clean. No fear. No doubt. No hesitation. A stone-faced man moving through disaster untouched. It is fantasy. It has nothing to do with real discipline. Real discipline lets the fear be present without letting it hold rank. The ranger is allowed to feel the heat on his face. He is allowed to notice the dryness in his throat, the ache behind his eyes, the animal part of his body asking for distance from the flames. Those signals are not weaknesses. They are part of being alive. But they cannot be the commander. The commander has to be the part of him that can still separate one fact from another. The fire is moving. The smoke is thickening. The trail behind him may no longer be reliable. The compass still points. His training has not disappeared just because his confidence has. That last one matters. A person under pressure often confuses confidence with capacity. When confidence drops, they assume capacity has dropped with it. They feel uncertain, so they believe they are unprepared. They feel afraid, so they believe they are failing. But uncertainty is not proof that you have lost your ability. It is proof that the moment has become expensive. The ranger lowers his shoulders by half an inch. Barely visible. Not dramatic. Not enough for a camera to celebrate. But the body notices when command returns in small amounts. He stops trying to feel ready. That is the first crack in the paralysis. The compass is no longer a magic object in his fist. It is a witness. It tells him one simple truth and refuses to decorate it. North is north. The needle does not care about his shame. It does not care about the unanswered message, the uniform, the years of experience, the fear of choosing wrong. It only points. And for a man surrounded by shifting fire lines, that kind of honesty is mercy. He does not need the whole forest to become visible. He needs to stop asking smoke for permission. The fire can move. The sky can darken. The radio can fail to give him a perfect sentence. But if his mind can return to sequence, the moment changes shape. It is still dangerous. It is still narrow. It is still bigger than him. But it is no longer shapeless. The park ranger looks down at the compass again. This time, he does not squeeze it for comfort. He holds it like a tool. The difference is small. Under pressure, small differences decide who is being commanded, and who is doing the commanding. Training does not begin after the smoke clears. It begins while the ranger's throat is dry, while the afternoon sky hangs low and dirty, while his hand still wants to squeeze the compass hard enough to turn fear into direction. He does not get a calm room. He does not get a clean map spread across a table. He gets ash on his sleeve, static in his ear, heat shifting somewhere beyond the trees, and a mind trying to split into too many futures at once. So he stops feeding it futures. The first act is not movement. It is refusal. He refuses to take one more step while his thoughts are still running ahead of his eyes. His boots stay where they are. His shoulders come down. He lets the compass rest flat in his palm instead of gripping it like a charm. That small change matters. A tool cannot serve a man who is begging it to save him. It can only serve a man willing to read it. He pulls one breath in carefully, not deep enough to pretend the air is clean, not dramatic enough to make a ritual out of danger. Just enough to notice the body again. The tight jaw. The burning throat. The shaky hand. The urge to rush into any direction just to escape the humiliation of standing still. He names it without ceremony. Indecision. Not wisdom. Not patience. Not caution. Indecision. The word lands hard because it removes the disguise. Once the shadow has a name, it loses some of its ability to imitate command. It is still there. It still presses behind his ribs. But now it has been seen. Then he looks at what is real. Compass. Wind. Heat. Trail cut. Radio. Boots. He does not let his mind explain each one yet. He only names them. The forest has become too loud for interpretation, so he returns to inventory. In pressure, inventory is mercy. It keeps the mind from turning one frightening moment into a whole ruined life. The compass needle steadies under the gray smear of ash. He wipes the glass again, slower this time, using the side of his glove. Not because the smear is important by itself, but because the way he touches the compass is the way he is teaching his mind to return. One motion. One surface. One fact. The fire has taken the wide view from him. So he makes the battle smaller. He does not ask, how do I survive the entire forest? That question is too large. It invites panic because the mind cannot hold it. He asks the next question that can be answered. Where is the last confirmed direction? The compass gives him north. His memory gives him the rough line of the maintenance track he saw before the smoke closed. His training gives him the rule beneath the rule: do not worship your first instinct when visibility is broken. Confirm what can be confirmed. Let the rest remain undecided until the next step earns more information. His hand moves to the radio. The old impulse wants a perfect reply before he moves. A full sentence. A clean instruction. Someone else's certainty poured into his ear. But the radio only gives him pieces, and pieces are what the moment offers. He presses the button and gives what he can give: position as best as he can identify it, condition, direction of movement, immediate concern. His voice is rough, but it is not frantic. He does not decorate the message with shame. He does not apologize for the smoke, for the broken visibility, for the fact that the forest is bigger than his confidence. He reports. That is discipline in a uniform, not sounding brave, not sounding impressive, just giving the next person something solid enough to use. Static answers him. He waits one beat, not 10. Then the compass comes back to the center of his body. This is the second act: anchor the body before the mind floats away. He places his thumb along the edge of the compass, not over the glass. He feels the metal rim, the sweat inside his glove, the fine grit of ash caught near the hinge. The object becomes more than direction now. It becomes a boundary. Every time his thoughts try to sprint toward disaster, his thumb returns to that rim. Here. This hand. This needle. This next step. He turns his body, not just his head. That matters too. A frightened person can look in a direction and still remain internally scattered. The ranger aligns his chest with the direction he has chosen. Boots follow. Pack shifts. Breath adjusts. The decision begins to enter the body. He does not pretend the choice is perfect. He chooses because waiting for perfect has become its own hazard. The forest resists him immediately. Smoke thickens between the trunks. Ash moves sideways. Somewhere behind him, another branch gives way with a flat, cracking sound. The animal part of his mind wants to look back again and again, to keep checking the threat until checking becomes paralysis. He allows one look. One. Then he returns to the compass. That is the third act: give fear a place, but not the whole room. He does not mock the fear. He does not shove it down and call that strength. Fear belongs here. Any honest body would feel it. But fear does not get to design the route. Fear can warn. It cannot command. He starts moving in measured steps, each one chosen, not spilled out of him. He keeps the compass where he can see it without turning it into an idol. He watches the ground close to him because the far distance is useless now. He notes what the trail gives him: a stump he passed earlier, a bend in the slope, the faint depression of an old service path under ash. Small confirmations. Small corrections. That is how command returns. Not as a speech. Not as a surge of courage. As the willingness to adjust without collapsing. A few minutes in, the shadow tries again. It comes through the body first. The throat tightens. The thoughts slow. A heavy blankness presses behind his eyes, and the mind offers him the old bargain: stop and wait until you feel clear. He knows that bargain now. So he changes the rhythm before the blankness becomes law. He lowers his pace. He brings the compass closer. He touches the rim once with his thumb. He says the next fact under his breath. Needle steady. 2 words. Enough. Then another. Track lower. Enough. He is not giving himself motivation. Motivation would be too loud for this place. He is giving himself command language. Short. Concrete. Close to the ground. A person in chaos does not need a beautiful sentence. He needs a sentence his nervous system can obey. The compass appears again and again in his hand, but each time it means something different. At first, it was a demand: tell me how to escape. Then it became a witness: north is north. Now it becomes a discipline: return here before the mind breaks sequence. The ritual is not mystical. It is brutally ordinary. Check the needle. Check the body. Check the next visible mark. Move. Report when possible. Correct without drama. Repeat. The repetition does not make the fire smaller. It makes the ranger less available to panic. That is the quiet power of Shugyo inside Fudoshin: hardship made intelligent, pressure broken into actions the body can still perform. The sky remains smoke-filled. The trail remains uncertain. The radio still cuts in and out like a voice underwater. But inside the ranger, something has stopped scattering. Not fear. Scattering. He is still afraid. He is still tired. His throat still burns. The unanswered photo from his sister still flickers somewhere in the back of his mind, that little girl with the backpack standing in clean morning light. But the image no longer pulls him away from the trees in front of him. It reminds him why command matters. People are connected to your next action whether they can see it or not. So he keeps the compass flat. He keeps his steps measured. He lets the forest be dangerous without letting his mind become useless. And with every return to the needle, every small correction, every refusal to wait for perfect certainty, the exit plan stops being a fantasy. It becomes a line he can walk. The forest does not reward him with silence. It does not open into some clean passage of sunlight, as if the moment has finally decided to become fair. The smoke still folds between the trees. The heat still moves in uneven pulses. The radio still breaks his name into fragments and static. Somewhere behind him, the fire keeps taking what is dry enough to surrender. Nothing outside has become easy. But the ranger is no longer asking easy to arrive. That is the change. Earlier, he had stood on the trail with the compass trapped in his fist, waiting for certainty to become large enough to save him. His mind had turned the smoke into a courtroom. Every direction felt like an accusation. Every second he stayed still made the next second heavier. He was not only surrounded by shifting fire lines. He was surrounded by the shame of not knowing fast enough. Now his hand is different. The compass rests flat. His thumb touches the rim, then releases. He reads it. He checks the world around it. He moves again. There is no drama in the motion, and maybe that is why it matters. Real command rarely looks like a movie poster. It looks like a man with ash on his sleeve choosing not to argue with the facts. It looks like one boot placed carefully, then the next. It looks like a jaw unclenching just enough for the mind to work again. The smoke tries to steal the trail twice. The first time, his body reacts before his thinking catches up. His shoulders rise. His hand starts to close around the compass again, hard, the old grip returning like a bad habit. For half a second, the shadow is back in full shape, the blank pause, the internal fog, the urge to stop moving until the whole picture appears. It does not appear. He almost waits for it. Then he feels the edge of the compass pressing into his glove and realizes what his hand is doing. He loosens it. That is transformation. Not a clean victory. Not the permanent disappearance of fear. Just catching the old pattern one breath earlier than before. The second time, he hears a sound through the trees and turns too quickly. Smoke stings his eyes. For one rough moment, the forest becomes a wall again. No line, no distance, no easy reference. His mind reaches for panic with the speed of a hand reaching for a hot stove. But now there is a ritual waiting beneath the fear. He brings the compass back to the center of his body. He lowers his gaze from the smoke to what can still be known. The ground. The slope. The shape of the trees nearest to him. The direction he committed to before the fear demanded another vote. He does not become fearless. He becomes harder to scatter. A few minutes later, the maintenance track appears in pieces. Not as rescue. Not as salvation. Just a faint cut in the earth, half covered by ash and needles, easy to miss if a man were moving too fast or too desperately. The ranger stops at its edge and looks down. His chest tightens again, but this time not only from smoke. Relief can be dangerous too. It can make the body careless. It can make a person celebrate before the work is finished. He knows that. So he does not let relief take command either. He gives the radio another controlled message, shorter than he wants, clearer than he feels. He listens. He catches only a broken reply. Enough to know he is not alone, not enough to hand over responsibility. The track runs ahead into the dirty afternoon. He follows it. The compass remains in his palm, but it has changed its meaning for the third time. At the beginning, it was something he needed to rescue him from uncertainty. In the middle, it became a way to return to sequence. Now it becomes a reminder of what the exit plan truly was. The exit was not only out of the forest. It was out of the paralysis. Out of the need for perfect confidence. Out of the shame that says a trained person must never hesitate. Out of the false idea that fear becomes harmless when you pretend not to feel it. The ranger still feels it. He feels the heat on his neck and the roughness in his breathing. He feels the small ache of the unanswered message from his sister. He thinks of the little girl in the backpack, standing in a clean doorway that feels like another planet now. The image does not soften the moment into sentiment. It sharpens it. There are people attached to whether he keeps command. That is true in a burning forest, and it is true in quieter places too. A person's next action is rarely private. The way you handle panic becomes part of the world someone else has to live in. Your delay, your steadiness, your honesty, your refusal to collapse into ego, these things travel farther than you think. The ranger keeps walking. The outside world continues to change without asking his permission. Wind shifts. Smoke lowers. The radio wakes and dies. He adjusts without making each adjustment a personal crisis. That may be the most grown-up form of discipline, not needing reality to flatter your plan before you obey what is right in front of you. Modern samurai discipline is not an ancient costume placed over a modern emergency. It is not pretending to be carved from stone. It is the ordinary, difficult work of becoming reliable when the situation becomes ugly. The ranger's uniform does not make him calm. His training does not erase his fear. The compass does not make the forest safe. But together, in his hand, in his breath, in his next measured step, they give his mind a place to stand. At last, the trees begin to thin. Not enough to call it over. Not enough for the body to fully trust the opening. But enough for the light to change. The sky ahead is still stained, still heavy, still wrong, yet there is more space between the trunks. The ranger pauses just long enough to read the compass again. This time, he does not ask it for courage. He asks it for truth. The needle gives what it has always given. He nods once, almost too small to see, and moves forward. Fear can still speak. Smoke can still blind. The fire can still change the shape of the day. But the man holding the compass has changed the shape of his obedience. He no longer obeys the fog. He obeys the next true direction. You may never stand on a California trail with ash on your sleeve and a fire line moving behind the trees. But you will meet your own smoke. It may come in a hospital hallway, when your family needs your voice steady. It may come at a kitchen table, when one hard decision keeps getting delayed. It may come in your car after work, when exhaustion makes every direction feel wrong. Your compass will not always be metal. Sometimes it is one breath. One fact. One honest next step. Do not wait until fear disappears before you move correctly. Let the fear speak, then return your hand to what is true. The ranger's exit plan was not perfect certainty. It was command restored one decision at a time. If this story found you in your own smoke, stay with the path. Fear can speak, but it does not get to command.